In the headlines, bereaved families of the April ferry disaster victims prolong a political deadlock by rejecting a bill long negotiated by Korea's two rival parties. South Korea's army chief vows to dismantle units that overlook anti-human behaviors amid recent findings of violence in military barracks. And a video released by ISIS militants shows the alleged beheading of a U.S. journalist and the threat of death for another American if Washington does not end military operations in Iraq. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us tonight. Bereaved families of the April ferry disaster victims are in the meeting as we speak to discuss whether to accept the Sewol-ho ferry bill, long negotiated by rival parties here in Korea. They argue that the ruling Saenuri Party should not be allowed to select any of the investigative panel members. The version of the bill agreed upon by parties yesterday says the ruling party must seek approval from the main opposition and families of the ferry victims for its selections. They've also been demanding that the special committee tasked with unveiling the truth behind the April ferry disaster have both investigative as well as prosecutorial powers. However, the main opposition party's interim chief, Park Young-sun, who is now in the meeting, is trying to persuade bereaved families that another negotiation is unlikely to be pushed. The latest defense activities coming out of Japan suggest that the country is shoring up support for the military at home. This comes despite Korea's continuous warnings that anything related to the security on the Korean peninsula requires Seoul's approval first. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
80 battle tanks, 60 military aircraft, and 2,300 troops pound the foothills of Mount Fuji amid thousands of spectators. This is part of annual live fire exercises for Japan's self-defense forces on Monday, a public display of the tactics and equipment that are used to defend Japanese territory.
They are great. These are the elite troops who will protect Japan, and I'm very glad they are on our side, not our enemies.
With all the fuss over China, Japan should have the equipment it needs, and I think it is the first step to building up deterrence.
While the crowd applauds Japan's expanding military role, it is a source of concern for neighboring countries like South Korea, a victim of Japan's militaristic past. Fearing the buildup, Seoul has repeatedly stressed that Japan must get its explicit consent on matters related to South Korea's security and interests. But Tokyo may already be in talks with Washington on countermeasures against such scenarios. According to the Japanese daily Yomiuri Shimbun Wednesday, the Japanese government plans to revise its defense treaty with the United States so it can provide weapons and ammunition to U.S. forces and air-to-air refueling for U.S. aircraft in the event of a security crisis on the Korean peninsula. The report said these will be part of the Japanese government's assistance for Washington and added the two sides are in their final stages of talks. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Historical differences have driven a sizable wedge between South Korea and Japan. President Park Geun-hye has yet to sit down for summit talks with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, that is, in a bilateral framework. A Korean diplomat says bilateral relations will likely remain at a standstill unless Japan owns up to its past wrongdoings. Our Foreign Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
South Korean ambassador to the United States An Ho-young says it's basic common sense that Japan should apologize for its wartime atrocities before bilateral summit talks occur between the nation's leaders. In a keynote speech at a seminar in Washington on Tuesday, An said Seoul would elevate its relations with Tokyo only when it's ready to acknowledge the past as it is. The diplomat said such action was necessary to ensure that a summit between the two leaders leads to improved ties. Relations between Korea and Japan have hit a new low in recent years as the Abe administration continues to distort historical facts. President Park Geun-hye refuses to sit down with their Japanese counterpart until he apologizes for Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women in early 20th century. The two leaders have not held a bilateral summit since either took office. Japan understands that settling the sexual slavery issue is key to cooling tensions with Korea, according to a senior foreign ministry official in Seoul. He told reporters Tuesday that the Korean and Japanese foreign ministers agreed in Myanmar earlier this month on the need for progress in their monthly high-level talks aimed at resolving the sex slavery issue. As for the past 3 rounds of talks that were held, the senior diplomat made clear that it's too early to talk about whether any progress is being made. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
The recent string of bullying incidents in the Korean military demand action, and the Army's Chief of Staff has vowed to take it. He says he's determined to reform the military as a flood of new abuse allegations emerge. Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
Investigations are underway into dozens of newly reported cases of sexual harassment and physical abuse at military barracks around the country, in the wake of a series of similar cases that have left the nation shaken, including the death of an Army private who was beaten to death by his superiors in April. More cases are coming to light. Army Chief of Staff General Kim Yo-han likened violence in the barracks to treason and said operations to root it out would soon begin. The general says strong measures will be taken, including the dismantling of units that failed to improve their situations. According to an Army official, a total of 758 cases were reported through military hotlines this month alone. That's an increase of 26% compared to the previous month. 3 cases in the eastern border town of Hwacheon are among those under investigation. Suspects there allegedly sexually molested 7 of their subordinates numerous times during April and May. In a different incident, an Army corporal is suspected of beating 2 of his subordinates and stuffing flies into their mouths. Most of the suspects defended their actions, saying they did it for fun or as an expression of friendliness. To better prevent such incidents, the Army has decided to strengthen military education and boost patrol and inspections in all units throughout the country. All able-bodied men are subject to 2 years of mandatory military service in South Korea. There are currently over 650,000 active servicemen in the country. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
North Korea continues to blast the ongoing joint military exercise between Seoul and Washington, saying that peace on the Korean peninsula is needed for economic development. North Korea's official news agency on Wednesday denounced the Ulji Freedom Guardian drills as an unacceptable provocation that threatens its sovereignty and dignity. It added the recent firing was an act of self-defense against what it believes are threats from the U.S. and South Korea, warning of unpredictable response if they continue. The 2014 Asian Games is set to kick off in the South Korean port city of Incheon in less than a month. A delegation from North Korea's Olympic Committee arrived in South Korea late Tuesday, greeting reporters with smiles but refusing to answer any of the questions. The group is made up of 8 North Korean officials, including Yang Sung-ho, the president of the Korean University of Physical Education in Pyongyang. During their stay, the delegation will also tour the main stadium and the athletes' village before leaving on Friday. Around 150 North Korean athletes will take part in the Incheon Asian Games, which will run from September 19th through October 4th. So nearly 10,000 athletes from dozens of Asian countries will be battling it out in Incheon next month in the 17th Asian Games. ARIRANG's Song Ji-sun tells us what to expect as well as how many medals Team Korea aims to grab.
Preparations are complete. The venues are ready, and the villages for the athletes and media are set to open their doors on September 5th. The torch is on its way as well. It's traveling through Gyeonggi-do province on Wednesday with stops in the cities of Ansan and Suwon. It's the 3rd time Korea is playing host to Asia's biggest sporting event, and the home field advantage has Korean athletes feeling confident. The team's goal is to earn at least 90 gold medals and place 2nd overall after China. The Korean baseball team, which has won the Asian Games a total of 3 times, including 4 years ago in Gwangju, is considered a favorite.
Gold, gold, gold is the only word on our minds. But we're keeping a close eye on Japan, Taiwan, and China, as they have improved over the past few years as well.
A total of 439 golds in 36 sports will be up for grabs at this international event, during which nearly 10,000 athletes from 45 different countries will compete. 150 of the participants will come from North Korea. A delegation from the North Olympic Committee is currently in the South to participate in the group draws on Thursday for 10 different sports, including basketball, volleyball, and football. North Korea has placed first in women's football twice before and are the favorites to win in Incheon. Team North Korea's goal overall is finishing in the top 10, something they've accomplished when the games were held in the South Korean port city of Busan 12 years ago. 송지선, ARIRANG News.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. A new survey suggests that Korea's new economic policy team is right to worry about Korea's potentially long-term slump, and that the team is moving in the right direction with its fiscal stimulus measures. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
The new economic team led by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has received a passing grade for boosting the domestic economy, at least according to the 37 economic experts recently surveyed by the Federation of Korean Industries. More than half of the respondents said the set of government stimulus measures proposed are sufficient for propping up the ailing economy. Just around 15% of them thought they were not. The experts surveyed also said that government measures should focus on boosting domestic demand by removing excessive regulations and running an expansionary fiscal and financial policy. While around half of the experts expressed concerns about the Korean economy falling into a low-growth trap that resembles that of Japan, the other half were more optimistic, saying the domestic economy is on a recovery track, but that the momentum has slowed because of the ferry disaster in April. They cited the sluggish real estate market, mounting household debt, and worsening consumer and business sentiment due to the ferry tragedy as the biggest challenges currently facing the economy. As for the long-term problems, the experts pointed to the absence of new growth engines, slumping private consumption and investment, the low birth rate, and Korea's aging population. The majority of the experts expect that domestic demand will return to the level seen just before the April ferry disaster if the government measures are implemented as planned. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
Samsung Electronics is expanding its business portfolio. It's acquired a 100% stake in QuietSide, a U.S.-based retailer for home appliances. It's declined to give further details, including the price, but some reports are estimating this deal to be worth $24 million. Samsung Electronics says this deal is expected to help expand its distribution channels in the North American market and to create synergy in its new growth engines like smart home. Samsung last week purchased another U.S.-based firm, a platform developer, SmartThings, which develops applications that monitor, control, and automate devices at home. Korea is fast becoming the #1 tourist destination for Chinese visitors, and with that, their spending is also expected to jump over the next 5 years or so. Chinese tourists are expected to spend over $30 billion in Korea in 2020, a near 5-fold increase compared to last year. They also say the number of Chinese tourists will increase by nearly 20% every year through 2020. To reach 15 million in that year. Over the summer, we've been seeing numerous musicals take stages throughout the country, and the Sejong Center is one of the venues. But of course, before the end of this vacation season, there are a couple more you want to check out. Our Imuni gives us a sneak preview.
The Italian classical composer comes back to life on the musical stage. A pivotal figure in the development of 18th century operas, Antonio Salieri taught some of the most famous musicians of all time, including Schubert, Beethoven, and Liszt. But throughout history, the classical composer has been hidden beneath the shadow of Mozart, his arch-rival. Now, the story of Salieri and his musical career comes into the spotlight as a dynamic and engaging performance. Also at the Sejong Center, for 2 nights only at the Grand Theater, one of the most beloved operas is set to take the stage. A collaboration between Korea's Seoul Opera and Italy's Rome Opera House, Tosca is one of Puccini's most performed tragic operas. It's a story about love and death, and the captivating opera singer Tosca, who falls in love with the artist Cavaradossi. Tragedy awaits this plot of love and jealousy, a performance being put on by the experienced and talented Italian artistic team, along with some of Korea's top opera singers. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
Islamic State militants have released a video allegedly showing the beheading of U.S. journalist James Foley, who went missing in Syria nearly 2 years ago. And for more, Paul Lee is joining us from the News Center. Paul, this shocking video, if true, may be a revenge killing, I would say, in response to ongoing U.S. military action in Iraq.
Well, the message was very clear. Before being brutally murdered, the man thought to be Foley, apparently coerced by his captors, blames the U.S. government for his impending death. The video's authenticity has not yet been verified, but it is sparking concerns that another journalist captured, also seen in the video, could be next. Our Connie Lee reports.
In a video released Tuesday by the Islamic State militants, it purportedly shows U.S. independent journalist James Foley being beheaded. The 39-year-old is seen wearing orange and on his knees, next to a gunman dressed in all black. The video, titled A Message to America, first starts off with a speech by President Barack Obama announcing that the U.S. military will begin targeted airstrikes in Iraq against the Islamic State, otherwise known as ISIS. The ordered airstrikes in the country was to help the Iraqi security force take on the militants who were gaining ground and killing thousands. The video then shows Foley reciting a statement, presumably forced by his captors, that his real killer is America. Soon after, Foley is killed. The video continues, showing another U.S. journalist named Steven Sotloff, with the gunmen threatening to kill him too, saying that the life of this American citizen depends on the actions of President Obama. The authenticity of the video is currently being verified. A spokesperson for the White House National Security Council released a statement saying that the U.S. intelligence community is working as quickly as possible to determine the authenticity of the video. If genuine, we are appalled by the brutal murder of an innocent American journalist, and we express our deepest condolences to his family and friends. Foley has been reporting in the Middle East for the past 5 years until he disappeared while in northwest Syria back in November 2012. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And now moving on to the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, Paul, Liberia has imposed a nationwide curfew to help prevent the spread of this disease. I mean, Liberia has been the hardest hit country in this latest outbreak. What's the latest on this health crisis?
Well, in addition to the overnight curfew, the government has enacted a strict quarantine of an area in the capital, Monrovia. All movement is being blocked in and out of the West Point slum, where an Ebola medical center was attacked this past weekend. Our Connie Kim has this story.
In a bid to stem the Ebola outbreak in Liberia, the nation's president has declared a nighttime curfew and ordered security forces to quarantine a slum that's home to at least 50,000 people.
The new quarantine areas include Monrovia's West Point slum and all entertainment centers. The new measures come as there was a glimmer of hope in the fight against the outbreak, as infected healthcare workers in Liberia are reported to be showing remarkable signs of improvement after taking the experimental drug ZMapp. The three are the first Africans to receive the treatment. ZMapp was first given to 2 U.S. aid workers and a priest earlier this month. The UN Health Agency says it's only made between 10 to 12 doses of the drug available, and the most recent shipment went to Liberia. Meanwhile, Liberia has confirmed that all 17 suspected Ebola patients who fled their quarantine center when it was looted last weekend have been accounted for. Their sudden disappearance sparked fears the deadly virus could spread into the densely populated slum around it. People have turned themselves in and have been transferred to another clinic. It's not yet known whether any of them actually have Ebola. Latest figures from the WHO show Liberia registered the most new Ebola deaths over a 3-day period in the latter half of last week, with 53. The overall death toll observed in Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria has now topped the 1,200 mark. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And turning now to Brazil, Paul, official campaigning for the upcoming presidential election there has kicked off as the country is still mourning the death of candidate Eduardo Campos. But it looks like his running mate, Marina Silva, could carry on the torch.
That's right. All eyes are on Silva, as the former Brazilian environment minister is expected to be named the next presidential candidate for the Socialist Party. This election took a tragic turn last week when Eduardo Campos, who was polling in 3rd place, suddenly died in a plane crash during bad weather. Silva's entry into the Brazil's presidential race will likely force a second runoff after experiencing a surge in support from voters, according to a poll released on Monday. The survey conducted by Foley showed the rising political star could have a chance at unseating the president, Dilma Rousseff.
Marina Silva didn't just inherit Eduardo's votes, but she also managed to gain among undecided voters and even a bit in relation to Dilma Rousseff. So in a poll last week, we saw Marina in 2nd place. But what is most revealing is Marina is beating Dilma in the 2nd round, which means if the election were today, Marina would have 47% of the vote and Dilma 43%.
Silva is expected to be officially nominated as early as Wednesday. However, radio and television ads featuring her beside the late Campos have already been released. Voters will still have some time to mull over the 3 main candidates, as Brazil's general elections will be held on October 5th.
I see. And finally, Paul, Ferrari has claimed the world record for the highest selling price for a car at auction. And this particular auction in the U.S. has been garnering a lot of attention around the world. So what was the final bid?
Well, the red 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO Berlinetta won the title as the world's most valuable car when it fetched for a $38.1 million on Thursday. The gala price, however, was a far cry from the estimated $70 million that vintage car experts had speculated. The bidding at Bonham's auction house jumped to $31 million in less than 1 minute, but quickly stalled out before an anonymous buyer made the top offer. The Ferrari GTO is a highly coveted among collectors, but not only for its beauty, but its racing pedigree. Bonham says the Ferrari was held by one family for 49 years, the longest single ownership for this model. In 1962, the almost new GTO crashed during a race near Paris, killing its French driver. The car was then repaired in Italy and sold in 1965 to Fabrizio Vogliati, saving it from the scrap heap. Vogliati went on to drive the iconic Ferrari in classic car and historic racing events for almost 40 years until his death in 2010. Chetty?
All right, Paul, of course it's an anonymous buyer, right? Thank you very much for those stories, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Kim Go-kyung. We're experiencing two very different weather patterns here in Korea. Those down south are getting heavy downpours while skies remain cloudy here in Seoul. But nationwide rain is in store overnight. Heavy rainfall advisories have been issued for Jeju as well as parts of Jeollanam-do, Gyeongsang-nam-do, and Busan. All of this is due to a low pressure front that is moving from the southwest. Now, from tomorrow early morning through Friday, heavy precipitation of more than 30 millimeters per hour, accompanied by strong winds, is in store for parts of the central regions. Also, a heads up for those of you down south, southern coastal regions are looking at over 200 millimeters of rain, and the central regions 150 millimeters at most. High levels of precipitation are expected, so please be extra careful on the road. On to Thursday's readings. Seoul hits 24 while Daegu and Busan reach 26. As for other places, Daejeon and Jeju make it to 27, Dokdo to 23. That'll do it for now, but I'll be back with more updates after 10.
Bo-kyung, thank you very much, and that will do it for this edition of ID9 News at 8. Thanks for watching and enjoy your evening.